Marcus Johnson was tired. The history teacher had spent all day explaining World War II to teenagers who seemed more interested in their phones than the past. As he drove home along Route 16, the late afternoon sun made him squint. All he wanted was dinner and his couch. That's when he saw her, a woman standing beside a silver sedan with a flat tire. Her arms were crossed, and she kept looking at her watch. Marcus noticed at least 5 cars drive past her without stopping. He sighed and pulled over to the shoulder about 20 feet ahead of her car. "Need some help?" Marcus called as he walked toward her. She was well dressed in a business suit, probably in her 40s, with worried eyes that showed immediate relief when he approached. "Oh, thank goodness," she said, her shoulders dropping. "I've been waiting for roadside assistance for almost an hour, but they keep saying it'll be another 30 minutes. I have an important dinner meeting, and I'm already going to be late." "I can change your tire," Marcus said with a kind smile. "It'll be faster than waiting." The woman introduced herself as Catherine Reeves. Marcus noticed how she kept her distance at first, clutching her purse tightly. He understood. A stranger on a lonely stretch of road could be threatening, especially as the day was fading into evening. "I'm Marcus," he said, making sure to keep his movements slow and predictable. "I teach history at Lincoln High. Let me get my jack from my car." As Marcus worked on loosening the lug nuts, Catherine slowly relaxed. She stood nearby, occasionally checking her phone. "Do you have a spare?" Marcus asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Yes, it's in the trunk," she replied, pressing a button on her key fob to open it. The summer heat made the work harder than usual. Marcus's blue shirt soon had dark patches of sweat, but he worked efficiently. He changed plenty of tires before, his own, his mother's, and once for an elderly neighbor during a rainstorm. "So what's this important meeting?" Marcus asked as he positioned the jack. Catherine hesitated before answering. "It's a foundation dinner. My husband is receiving an award for his charity work." As they talked, Marcus learned that Catherine's husband ran a large foundation that funded education programs. Marcus mentioned his own experiences teaching in an underfunded school where many students faced serious challenges at home. "That sounds exactly like the kind of school our foundation tries to help," Catherine said, suddenly more interested. "How do you keep the students engaged?" Marcus smiled as he carefully placed the flat tire in her trunk. "Honestly, by treating them like their opinions matter. Even when they're wrong, I make sure they know their thoughts are worth hearing." The whole process took about 20 minutes. When Marcus finished, his hands were dirty and his back ached, but Catherine's car was ready to go. "You've saved me," Catherine said, her earlier caution replaced with genuine gratitude. "Please, let me pay you something for your trouble." Marcus shook his head. "No need, just help someone else when you get the chance." Catherine seemed surprised by his refusal, but then took out a business card. "At least take my card. My husband and I might be able to help your school." Marcus accepted the card to be polite, though he'd heard similar promises before that led nowhere. As Catherine drove away, he wiped his hands on an old rag and returned to his own car, thinking only about the shower waiting for him at home. He had no idea that this simple act of kindness would completely change his life by this time tomorrow. Marcus woke up the next morning to the sound of rain tapping against his bedroom window. He stretched and checked his phone. 6:15 a.m. Perfect timing as always, 5 minutes before his alarm. 15 years of teaching had programmed his internal clock. After a quick shower, Marcus made coffee and toast while listening to the morning news. Nothing special happened during his drive to Lincoln High School. The rain had stopped, leaving everything looking clean and fresh. "Morning, Mr. Johnson." Several students greeted him as he walked down the hallway to his classroom. "Morning, everyone," Marcus replied with a smile. The students liked him because he made history interesting and treated them with respect. Even the troublemakers in his class paid attention most days. His first 3 classes went by quickly. During lunch break, Marcus sat in the teacher's lounge eating his sandwich when he remembered Catherine's business card from yesterday. He pulled it from his wallet and examined it properly for the first time. "Reeves Foundation," it said in simple black letters. "Catherine Reeves, board member." Below was a phone number and email address. The card was expensive looking, made of thick cream-colored paper. Marcus's friend Tom, the math teacher, sat down across from him. "What's that?" Got a hot date. Marcus laughed and explained about helping the woman with the flat tire. She said her husband runs some foundation that helps schools like ours. Yeah, right. Tom snorted. Rich people love to talk about helping schools, but watch, nothing will come of it. Marcus nodded, putting the card back in his wallet. Tom was probably right. Still, it had felt good to help someone. The afternoon classes dragged on. By the final bell, Marcus was tired and ready to go home. He packed up his laptop and lesson plans, said goodbye to a few students still hanging around, and headed to the parking lot. That's when he first noticed the black SUV. It was parked across the street from the school, a large, expensive-looking vehicle with darkly tinted windows. Marcus wouldn't have paid attention to it, except he had the strange feeling someone was watching him from inside. He shook off the feeling, then got into his car. The drive home started normally. Marcus stopped at a grocery store to pick up some chicken and vegetables for dinner. When he came out 20 minutes later, he spotted the same black SUV, or one that looked just like it, in the parking lot, about 7 spots away from his car. Weird coincidence, Marcus muttered to himself. As he drove the last few miles toward his apartment building, Marcus became certain the SUV was following him. It stayed 3 or 4 cars behind, but every turn Marcus made, the black vehicle made too. His heart beat faster. Was he being paranoid? Maybe it was just someone who lived in his neighborhood, but deep down, Marcus knew this wasn't normal. He decided to test his theory. Instead of turning left toward his apartment building, Marcus made a sudden right turn down a side street he never used. Sure enough, the black SUV turned too. Now Marcus was worried. He thought about calling the police, but what would he say? A nice car is driving behind me. They would laugh at him. Instead, he called his sister Janelle. Hey, I need you to stay on the phone with me, he said when she answered. There's a car following me, and I don't know why. What? Are you serious? Janelle's voice filled with concern. What kind of car? A black SUV with tinted windows. I can't see who's inside. Just as Marcus said this, the SUV suddenly sped up. It pulled into the lane beside him, keeping pace with his car. The passenger window slowly rolled down. Marcus gripped his steering wheel tightly, ready to speed away if necessary. Then he saw who was in the SUV, and his mouth fell open in shock. Janelle, I'll call you right back, Marcus said into his phone, his voice tight with tension. Don't you dare hang up. Who is it? His sister demanded. But Marcus had already ended the call, staring in disbelief at the face looking out at him from the SUV's window. It was Catherine Reeves, the woman whose tire he had changed yesterday. Catherine waved and pointed to a coffee shop on the corner ahead. She mouthed the words, "Can we talk?" Marcus hesitated. This whole situation felt strange. Why would this woman be following him in a fancy SUV instead of just calling the number on his school's website? Still, his curiosity was stronger than his suspicion, and the coffee shop was public and busy, safe enough. He nodded and turned into the parking lot. The black SUV pulled in beside him. Marcus took a deep breath before getting out of his car. Mr. Johnson. Catherine called as she stepped out of the SUV. I'm so sorry if we frightened you. Marcus noticed she said we. The driver's door opened, and a tall man in an expensive-looking suit emerged. He had gray hair at his temples and walked with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. This is my husband, Robert Reeves, Catherine said. He insisted on meeting you after I told him what happened yesterday. Robert extended his hand. Marcus Johnson. It's a pleasure to meet the man my wife hasn't stopped talking about since yesterday evening. Marcus shook his hand cautiously. You could have just called the school. Robert smiled. You're right. This was dramatic, and I apologize. Old habits from my security days. Let's go inside and I'll explain everything. The coffee shop was warm and smelled of fresh pastries. After they ordered, black coffee for Robert, a latte for Catherine, and green tea for Marcus. They sat at a corner table away from other customers. First, Robert began, "Thank you for helping Catherine yesterday. You saved her from missing an important foundation event." "It was nothing," Marcus replied. "Anyone would have done the same." Catherine shook her head. 6 cars passed me before you stopped. Not everyone would have helped. The point is, Robert continued, Catherine was impressed not just by your kindness, but by what you told her about your teaching philosophy. I've spent the last 15 years running the Reeves Foundation. We focus on educational opportunities in underserved communities. Marcus remembered his conversation with Tom in the teacher's lounge. He remained skeptical. That's admirable work. We try, Robert said. But we've been missing something important. Most of our board members come from business backgrounds. We need educators who understand what really happens in classrooms. Catherine leaned forward. I did some research on you last night, Marcus. Your students have the highest history test scores in the district, despite coming from some of the most challenging backgrounds. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. How did you research me? Robert had the grace to look embarrassed. I have connections on your school board. Nothing invasive, I promise. Just your teaching record. And what exactly do you want from me? Marcus asked directly. Robert placed a folder on the table. We're launching a new initiative to redesign how history is taught in inner-city schools. We need an advisor who actually knows what works with real students. The position pays $85,000 a year, and you'd still teach part-time. Marcus nearly choked on his tea. That was almost double his current salary. This is, he started, unsure what to say. Unexpected. Overwhelming. Catherine suggested. We understand. Take the folder home. Read through everything. Call us when you've had time to think. Robert handed Marcus a business card similar to Catherine's. And again, I apologize for the dramatic approach. Old habits die hard. As Marcus drove home later with the folder on his passenger seat, he couldn't stop his mind from racing. Was this a genuine opportunity or something more complicated? He needed to call Janelle back and tell her what happened, and maybe do some research of his own on the Reeves Foundation. Marcus couldn't sleep that night. The folder from Robert Reeves sat on his kitchen table like a ticking bomb. He had called Janelle back and told her everything, but she was suspicious. It sounds too good to be true, she had said. Why would rich people stalk you in an SUV just to offer you a job? Something doesn't add up. Now, at 2:17 a.m., Marcus sat at his laptop with a cup of tea, researching the Reeves Foundation. Their website looked professional, with photos of smiling children and teachers in classrooms. According to the About Us page, the foundation had donated over $30 million to education programs in the last decade. Seems legitimate. Marcus muttered to himself as he scrolled through news articles mentioning the foundation. They had been featured in several respectable publications. He found Robert Reeves' biography. Before starting the foundation, Robert had worked for a private security firm that protected wealthy clients. That explained his strange approach to recruiting Marcus. By the time morning came, Marcus had filled 3 pages in his notebook with information about the Reeves Foundation. Everything checked out, but something still bothered him. Why him? There were thousands of teachers in the city with good test scores. As Marcus prepared for school, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. Hello, he answered cautiously. Marcus Johnson. This is Principal Rivera from Westside Academy. Marcus frowned. Westside Academy was one of the most prestigious private schools in the city. Yes, this is Marcus. I'm calling because Robert Reeves gave me your name. He speaks very highly of you. Marcus nearly dropped his coffee. Robert Reeves mentioned me to you. Yes, he's one of our biggest donors. He said you're considering joining his foundation's new initiative, but I wanted to let you know we also have an opening for a history department chair. The salary is competitive, and the resources are excellent. After promising to consider the offer, Marcus hung up in disbelief. Somehow, overnight, Robert Reeves had opened doors that Marcus had never even dreamed of approaching. At school that day, Marcus struggled to focus on teaching. During his free period, he decided to visit Ms. Garcia, the school counselor who had been at Lincoln High for over 30 years. She knew everyone in the education community. Reeves Foundation? She repeated when Marcus mentioned it. Oh yes, they're legitimate. They funded our computer lab 3 years ago. Robert and Catherine are good people, though Robert can be unusual in his methods. Unusual how? Marcus asked. Ms. Garcia laughed. When they were considering our grant application, Robert came to school pretending to be a substitute teacher. He wanted to see our needs firsthand without anyone putting on a show for a donor. That's just his way. This information made Marcus feel better. At least there was a pattern to Robert's strange behavior. That evening, Marcus finally opened the folder. Inside was a detailed proposal for the position, along with a personal note from Robert. Marcus, I apologize again for our unorthodox introduction. The truth is, good teachers are the heart of education, but the system rarely rewards them properly. Catherine and I want to change that. Whether you join us or not, know that what you do every day matters. Call me anytime. Robert. Also in the folder was a check for $5,000 with another note. For Lincoln High's history department. No strings attached. Marcus stared at the check. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about his students and what he could do for them. He picked up his phone and dialed Robert's number. Hello, Marcus. Robert answered on the second ring. Have you made a decision? Not yet, Marcus replied. But I have some questions, and I'd like to meet again. This time on my terms. Of course, Robert said, and Marcus could hear the smile in his voice. Name the time and place. Marcus took a deep breath. Tomorrow, Lincoln High. I want you to see what we're doing and what we need. We'll be there, Robert promised. As Marcus hung up, he realized his life was changing in ways he never expected. But whether this change would be good or bad remained to be seen. The next morning, Lincoln High School buzzed with unusual energy. Word had spread that important visitors were coming, though few knew the real story. Marcus had told only Principal Wong about the Reeves Foundation's interest. Marcus stood in his classroom doorway during first period, watching students file in. Many of these teenagers came from tough situations, broken homes, poverty, neighborhoods where gunshots were as common as birdsong. Yet they showed up every day, carrying hopes too heavy for their young shoulders. Everyone settled down, Marcus said as the bell rang. Today we're continuing our discussion on civil rights movements. He taught his lesson with passion, but part of his mind kept drifting to the upcoming meeting. What if Robert and Catherine were disappointed when they saw the reality of Lincoln High? The peeling paint, the outdated textbooks, the challenges his students faced. At exactly noon, Principal Wong's voice crackled over the intercom. Mr. Johnson, please report to the main office. A few students made teasing sounds. Boo, Mr. J's in trouble. Marcus smiled. Keep working on your group projects. I'll be back soon. When he reached the office, Robert and Catherine Reeves were waiting. Catherine wore a simple blue dress, while Robert had traded yesterday's business suit for khakis and a button-down shirt, clearly trying to blend in. Marcus, Robert extended his hand. Thank you for inviting us. Principal Wong looked nervous but pleased. Mr. and Mrs. Reeves have explained their interest in our history program. This could be a wonderful opportunity. I hope so, Marcus said cautiously. Would you like to see the school? For the next hour, Marcus guided the Reeves through Lincoln High's reality, the computer lab with machines from a decade ago, the library with empty shelves where new books should be, the gym with its leaking roof. Rather than being disappointed, Robert took notes and asked thoughtful questions. Catherine spoke warmly with students they encountered, showing genuine interest in their stories. And this is my classroom, Marcus said finally, opening the door where his students were still working. 28 faces looked up. Marcus introduced the visitors simply as friends interested in our school, without mentioning money or foundations. What happened next surprised him. Instead of just observing, Robert asked if he could speak to the class. When Marcus nodded, Robert stepped forward. I'm curious, Robert said. What makes Mr. Johnson's class different from your other classes? After an awkward silence, Deshawn, an usually quiet student, raised his hand. He tells us the real history, not just the textbook stuff, and he listens when we talk. Others joined in. He doesn't give up on us. He brings history to life. He makes us feel smart. Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. He hadn't expected this outpouring. After class ended, Robert pulled Marcus aside in the empty hallway. Catherine and Principal Wong had gone to discuss administrative matters. I need to tell you something, Robert said, his voice serious. The job offer is real, but there's more to this story. Marcus tensed. What do you mean? Robert glanced around to make sure they were alone. Catherine didn't get a flat tire by accident. We've been watching your career for almost a year. What? Marcus stepped back, suddenly uncomfortable. The foundation is expanding, Robert continued. We need someone to eventually take over leadership. The tire was Catherine's idea, to see how you would react to someone in need when you thought no one was watching. Marcus frowned. So you tested me? Without my knowledge or consent? Yes, Robert admitted. And I understand if that changes everything. Marcus leaned against the wall, processing this revelation. The offer was still amazing, but the manipulation bothered him deeply. I need time to think, Marcus said finally. Robert nodded. Of course. But whatever you decide about the job, know that what we saw today confirms everything we believed about you. You're exactly who these kids need. As Robert walked away, Marcus stood alone in the hallway, facing the biggest decision of his life. 3 days had passed since Robert's shocking revelation. Marcus sat alone on his small apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. A half-empty cup of coffee sat cold beside him. His phone lay on the table, Robert Reeves' number pulled up but not yet dialed. Marcus had barely slept, turning the situation over in his mind like a complex puzzle. The offer was incredible: more money, more resources, more ability to help students beyond just his classroom. But the method Robert and Catherine used to find him felt wrong. They had manipulated him, tested him without his knowledge. What else might they do in the future? His sister Janelle had been clear. Tell them to take their money and shove it. Nobody has the right to play games with your life. But Ms. Garcia, the school counselor, had a different view when Marcus confided in her. Sometimes good people use strange methods, she had said. The question is, will more students benefit if you take this opportunity? A text message made his phone buzz. It was from Deshawn, the quiet student who had spoken up during Robert's visit. Mr. J, did you grade our papers yet? Also, my mom wants to know if you're really leaving. News traveled fast at Lincoln High. Marcus hadn't told his students anything, but they sensed something was happening. They always did. Marcus texted back, papers tomorrow, and I haven't made any decisions yet. After sending the message, he finally picked up his phone and called Robert. Marcus, Robert answered immediately. I've been hoping to hear from you. I want to meet again, Marcus said, with both you and Catherine. Tonight if possible. 2 hours later, Marcus sat across from the Reeves at a small restaurant downtown. The dinner crowd had thinned, giving them privacy to talk. Before you say anything, Catherine began, I want to apologize. The flat tire setup was my idea. I thought it was clever, but now I see it was unfair to you. Marcus appreciated her directness. I understand why you did it. You wanted to see my character when I thought no one was watching. But trust goes both ways. Robert nodded slowly. You're right. We should have been more transparent from the beginning. I have conditions, Marcus said, surprising himself with his boldness. If I accept your offer, I want complete honesty going forward. No more tests or games. Absolutely, Robert agreed. And I want to continue teaching at Lincoln High part-time. Those kids need stability. Catherine smiled. We were hoping you'd say that. We don't want to take you away from the classroom completely. One more thing, Marcus added. I want Lincoln High to be the first school in the new program. New computers, new books, building repairs, everything. Robert and Catherine exchanged glances. That would mean restructuring our rollout plan, Robert said. We had planned to start with 5 schools across the city simultaneously. Those are my terms, Marcus said firmly. I won't leave my students behind while I go help others. A moment of silence followed. Then Robert extended his hand across the table. Deal, he said. Lincoln High becomes our flagship school. We'll redirect resources immediately. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he shook Robert's hand. He had stood his ground and advocated for his students. As they discussed details, Catherine mentioned something that caught Marcus by surprise. There's a gala next month for foundation donors, she said. We'd like you to be the keynote speaker. Your story, both your teaching philosophy and how we met, will help inspire others to contribute. Marcus laughed. You want me to tell everyone how you faked a flat tire to test me? Absolutely, Robert said. Our methods were unusual, but the results are worth celebrating. Sometimes the best partnerships begin in unexpected ways. As Marcus drove home that night, he felt both nervous and excited about the future. He had faced a crossroads and chosen a path that stayed true to himself while opening new possibilities. Tomorrow, he would tell his students the news that he was staying, and that big changes were coming to Lincoln High. The school auditorium hummed with excitement. All of Lincoln High's students and teachers had gathered, curious about the sudden assembly Principal Wong had called. Rumors flew through the crowd: budget cuts, school closure, a famous visitor. Marcus stood backstage, adjusting his tie nervously. Beside him, Robert and Catherine Reeves reviewed their notes one last time. "Are you ready for this?" Robert asked. Marcus took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." Principal Wong stepped to the microphone. "Good morning, everyone. I have exciting news to share. Lincoln High has been selected as the flagship school for the Reeves Foundation's new educational initiative." A confused murmur spread through the audience. Most students had never heard of the Reeves Foundation. "This means," Principal Wong continued, "that over the next 6 months, our school will receive complete technological upgrades, building renovations, new textbooks, and expanded after-school programs." Now the students erupted in cheers and applause. In a school where broken equipment and outdated materials were the norm, this news seemed miraculous. I'd like to introduce Robert and Catherine Reeves, who will explain more about this partnership. As the couple took the stage, Marcus watched from the wings. Just 2 weeks ago, he had been a regular teacher worrying about next month's rent. Now he stood on the edge of something much bigger. Robert explained the foundation's mission, while Catherine outlined the specific improvements planned for Lincoln High. Then Robert gestured toward the side of the stage. "And none of this would be happening without one of your own teachers, who impressed us with his dedication and vision. Please welcome the new Director of Educational Programming for the Reeves Foundation, Mr. Marcus Johnson." The students' reaction when Marcus walked on stage took his breath away. They stood, cheering and stomping. Several students whistled loudly. Marcus saw Deshawn in the front row, grinning widely and clapping harder than anyone. "Thank you," Marcus said when the noise finally settled. "As many of you already know, I'm not going anywhere. I'll continue teaching here part-time while also working with the foundation to bring these same opportunities to other schools." Marcus explained how the partnership began, with a flat tire on the side of the road. He shared the story honestly, including how Robert and Catherine had tested him. Some teachers frowned at this part, but the students seemed to appreciate the transparency. "Life gives us moments of choice," Marcus concluded. "When you see someone who needs help, stopping might seem small, but you never know where that simple choice might lead." After the assembly, students crowded around Marcus, asking questions about the changes coming to their school. One question came up repeatedly: "Will you still be our teacher?" "Yes," Marcus assured them each time. 3 days a week, same as always." Later that afternoon, Marcus met with the teachers who would be most affected by the new programs. Some were excited, others skeptical. Tom, the math teacher, pulled Marcus aside. "So these rich people just happened to pick our school because you changed a tire? There's got to be more to it." "There is," Marcus admitted. They'd been watching several schools for months. The tire was just the final test. Tom shook his head. "Well, I don't care about their methods as long as our kids benefit. Just don't forget where you came from when you start moving in those wealthy circles." "I won't," Marcus promised. That evening, Marcus sat at his desk reviewing architectural plans for Lincoln High's renovation. His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Wear something nice. The members are excited to meet you." As Marcus set his alarm for an earlier wake-up time, he reflected on how quickly life can change. One moment on a roadside had altered his path completely. He wondered what other moments of choice awaited him, and what doors they might open. The black SUV that had once followed him now waited each morning to drive him to Foundation headquarters. The vehicle that had once caused fear now represented opportunity. Like so many things in life, its meaning had transformed entirely based on understanding and context. Marcus closed his eyes, grateful and ready for whatever came next. 1 year had passed since the day Marcus stopped to help Catherine with her flat tire. Lincoln High School was transformed. The hallways gleamed with fresh paint in bright blues and yellows. New computers filled the lab. The library shelves held current books. Even the once leaking gym roof was fixed. But the biggest changes weren't physical. Students who once skipped school now arrived early. Test scores had risen across all subjects. 3 seniors had received college scholarships from the Reeves Foundation. On this particular morning, Marcus stood in the parking lot watching students arrive. He still taught history 3 days a week, though his foundation work kept him busy the other days. "Mr. J," Deshaun called, walking over with a thick envelope in his hand. "I got in, Stanford University." Marcus grinned and gave his student a firm handshake that turned into a quick hug. "I knew you would. They'd be crazy not to take you." "My mom cried all night," Deshaun said, his own eyes shining. "Nobody in my family ever went to college before." As they talked about Deshaun's plans, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Robert Reeves stepped out, waving to Marcus. "Your boss is here?" Deshaun said. Marcus shook his head. "Partner, not boss. There's a difference." After Deshaun headed inside, Robert joined Marcus. "Ready for today? The governor will be at the announcement." Today was the official launch of the statewide program. What had started at Lincoln High would now expand to 50 schools across the state. "I'm ready," Marcus confirmed. "But I had an idea I wanted to run by you first." They walked together toward the school while Marcus explained his new proposal. A summer program where high-performing students from Lincoln High would mentor elementary school kids. "I love it," Robert said. "Let's put together a budget next week." Inside, Catherine was already in the conference room setting up for a meeting with other school principals. She had become a regular presence at Lincoln High, often sitting in on classes to better understand the students' needs. "Marcus," she called, "can you look at these brochures before they go to print?" As Marcus reviewed the materials, he marveled at how comfortable he now felt in this role. The initial awkwardness with Robert and Catherine had faded, replaced by genuine friendship and mutual respect. Later that afternoon, Marcus stood at a podium in front of news cameras and local officials. Behind him, Robert and Catherine sat alongside the governor and Principal Wong. "1 year ago," Marcus began, "I was just a history teacher with big dreams for my students but limited resources to help them succeed." He shared the now famous story of the flat tire, which had become something of a legend. Several newspapers had covered it with headlines like "Roadside Assistance Leads to Educational Revolution." "What started with one school has grown beyond what any of us imagined," Marcus continued. "Today, we announced the expansion of our program to 50 schools statewide, reaching over 30,000 students." The audience applauded enthusiastically. Marcus caught sight of several of his students in the back of the room, watching proudly. After the formal announcement, Marcus slipped away from the crowd. He needed a moment alone to process everything. In a quiet corner of the library, he found an old photo on his phone, a selfie he'd taken on the day he helped Catherine, his face sweaty and dirty from changing the tire. He had almost deleted it, but now he was glad he hadn't. A text message from his sister Janelle popped up. "Saw you on the news. So proud of you, bro." Marcus smiled and put away his phone as he heard footsteps approaching. Deshaun appeared with several other students. "Mr. J, they want us for photos with the governor and stuff," Deshaun said. "Let's go then," Marcus replied, standing up. As they walked together, one of the younger students asked, "Is it true you only got this job because you helped someone with a flat tire?" Marcus shook his head. "No, I got it because I was already doing the work that mattered. The flat tire just helped someone notice." Outside, the same black SUV that had once followed and now waited to take the team to their next school visit. What had begun with suspicion had transformed into purpose. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the most important turns in life's journey aren't marked by signs. They appear as simple choices between walking away or stopping to help.